Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're taking what looks like a totally ordinary 150-word gardening blog post, and we're going to unpack a massive, mind-blowing biological phenomenon hidden right inside of it. So let's look closely at what happens when you view a standard backyard garden through a completely new lens.
To kick things off, I want to drop you right into the exact perspective of our source author, a blogger who goes by the name Ang. Just picture stepping out into your own garden. You know, a place you've probably walked through 100 times before. But this time, on this specific day, you've got a brand new tool in your hands. Ang writes, with the new mobile phone camera and its higher capability, I've managed to capture much greater detail of the plant species in our collection. And you know what? That new macro lens literally changes everything. Suddenly, you aren't just looking at regular old leaves and stems anymore, you're looking at the microscopic architecture of nature. You're seeing these hidden blueprints of life that are just completely invisible to the naked eye.
Okay, let's dive into this. The specific subject under that high-capability lens today is Holy Basil, scientifically known as ocimum-tenuiflorum. But here's the thing. As Ang points their camera directly at the tiny flowers of this super common herb, something totally unexpected jumps right out from the screen.
Which brings us to the orchid illusion.
So on one side we have the mint family, Lamiaceae, which is where our Holy Basil officially belongs. On the other side is the orchid family, Orchidaceae. Now, evolutionarily speaking, these two sit on entirely different branches of the plant kingdom. They're not closely related at all. And yet, under that macro lens, this Holy Basil flower mimics an orchid almost perfectly. It's uncanny.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the actual mechanics of this deception. Let's look closely. First off, notice the bilateral symmetry. Basically, if you draw a line right down the middle, it's a perfect mirror image. It also features these really delicate pale purple petals. But the true masterpiece here? It's that prominent lower petal. It is perfectly shaped to mimic the famous lip or labellum that orchids are so well known for.
And that leads us to the why behind all this. Engineered for pollinators.
And this brilliantly illustrates a three-step biological trap. Here's how it works. First, the plant forms that prominent lower petal we just talked about, acting as this super inviting landing pad. Next, it uses this exact structure to attract pollinators that are hunting for nectar. But the absolute genius is in the final phase. By essentially forcing the insect to land on that specific petal, the flower ensures the pollinator is perfectly positioned to brush directly against the plant's reproductive organs. It's basically a highly engineered toll booth for bugs.
So what does this all mean? Well, let's get into the grand reveal. What we're looking at here is a textbook case of convergent evolution. Both the mint and the orchid faced very similar environmental pressures. Basically, they both needed a highly efficient way to force pollinators into contact with their pollen. And the wild part? Separated by a vast evolutionary distance, they independently engineered the exact same floral landing pad to solve that problem. Independently. They didn't inherit this from a common ancestor, they just both landed on the exact same brilliant solution.
But what makes this explainer so exciting to me is that this concept entirely transcends the plant kingdom. Later in the blog post, Ang points out this massive realization. They had actually observed and discussed this exact same evolutionary phenomenon way earlier, all the way back in part 165 of their notes, which, get this, was entirely focused on their fish-keeping journey. I mean, think about that for a second. The exact same biological rule that shapes the pale purple petals of Holy Basil in the garden is also hard at work under the water, shaping the behaviors and adaptations of entirely unrelated fish in an aquarium. It's just a universal rule of nature.
Ang actually signs off the blog post with a super simple question. Isn't this rather fascinating? And you know what? I want to leave you by taking that exact thought and pushing it just a little bit further. If a mint plant can perfectly mimic an orchid just to solve a mechanical problem, and if fish in a glass tank follow the exact same rules of convergent evolution, what else is out there? Seriously, when you look around your world today, what other completely unrelated species are secretly sharing the exact same survival blueprints, just waiting for someone to look closely enough to see the connection? Keep your eyes open, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.